Now, just to clarify something, you hear the word naturalism. Naturalism is the same as materialism.
Primarily, no. Pragmatically, sure. See, naturalism refers to things of non-supernatural nature, i.e. the tested, the experienced, and sometimes the explained. Thus far, everything in that definition has been material, i.e. there is no evidence of the non-material. Thus it is not covered under what is natural, and therefore stands under supernatural claims. Now, if I was a truly cheap individual trying to score easy points, I would argue that this is your acknowledgement that your position has zero evidence. However, I understand that you think differently, therefore I shall take this as merely a result of your ignorance on the terms and their meaning.
Materialism is the same as evolutionism. Evolutionism is the same as millions of years. They're all interchangeable.
First of all, it is evolution, not evolutionism. That's just a rather pathetic dig, similar to what I expect from a 6-year-old on a playground. Secondly, no, evolution is not interchangeable with any of these terms. Evolution is currently the naturalistic explanation of biodiversity, which requires zero supernatural elements. What you are saying is akin to maths means histograms. That is all it is. The two words are interchangeable, maths and histogram. As for millions of years, that's the realm of physics. Physics argues on the fact that the Earth has existed for over millions of years, in fact entering into the billions of years. This is done via measuring the half-life of crystal zircon, a rather tough little structure which has played a key role in dating the age of the Earth and even the universe itself. Unlike carbon-14, which can be affected by the alpha particles of local uranium deposits, the zircon crystal's tough structure rejects exterior lead, meaning that all the lead found within the zircon crystal must have been produced via radio decay, making it a reliable isotope. Just remember, this is physics, not biology. This is the same field of science that works in the way that your very camera records your speech and the laptop you are using currently, Mr. Martin.
Now, in some of the textbooks battles here in Texas, the textbook company, one of them said, well, we don't teach evolution in our textbook. But they had millions of years all through the textbook. They're synonymous. They're synonymous. When you talk about naturalism, you're talking about materialism, you're talking about evolutionism, you're talking about millions of years. They're all the same.
I don't even... How did you come to that conclusion? Millions of years does not suddenly equate evolution, but it does certainly falsify young Earth creationism. The age of the Earth is a question for physics and geology, not biology and evolution.
So then how is it all supposed to work? Well, random mutations cause changes or variations in a population of organisms. I don't think a creationist would argue with that. These different organisms then compete to survive and reproduce. That's true. Those which are best able to survive and reproduce do so. That's true. They tend to leave the most offspring. This is called natural selection. I don't have a problem with that. Over time, if some organisms survive and reproduce more than others, a species will evolve. I wouldn't use the word evolve exactly like that, but the fact is, it's still going to be a bird. It might be a different kind of finch, but it's still a finch. So yes, there's changes that happen that way. Well, how do we get then a monkey to become a man? How does that work? Is there any evidence for that?
So we agree. Birds are still dinosaurs, men are still apes. You have just agreed with evolution up to the point that you don't like the word evolve. Your argument is solely based off semantics at this point.
You see lots of pictures of a monkey or an ape or some kind of a primate, and then here comes one that his chin doesn't stick out quite as much, his nose begins to stick out a little bit more, and then a little while later he's looking a little less like a monkey, a little more like a man, and then finally you have Uncle Harry gets up and walks off. And so what do we have? We have the monkey or the ape, we have Uncle Harry. What are these in-between forms that you see, the National Geographic kind of a thing, where you see all these different kinds of monkey-like or man-like monkeys and monkey-like men coming along here. What is that? We've got the monkey, we've got Uncle Harry. What is in between is called art. How do we know this? Well, because Science Digest told us concerning anthropological art, the study of man using art. It says, unfortunately, the vast majority of artists' conceptions are based more on imagination than evidence. We got the monkey, we got the man, we got a lot of imagination in between. Much of the reconstruction, however, is guesswork. Bones say nothing about the fleshy parts of the nose, lips, or ears. Have you ever found a bone with a lip on it? How do they know what the lip looked like? Well, what does it say right here? Artists must create something between an ape and a human being. So that's what they're going to do. They're just going to create something. The older a specimen is said to be, the more ape-like they make it.
The fleshy parts. That does not negate the shape of the skull and the jaw, or the development of the pelvic region, or the development of the feet. That is not guesswork. We're purely on about the cosmetic features here, just like the colour of dinosaurs, for example. However, bone depressions can actually give us an idea of the shape of the muscles and, of course, the size of the nose and the eyes, based off the size of their respective holes, so it's not entirely guesswork, actually.
How do they know how old it was? The dating techniques don't work. I have a whole chapter in my book, The Evolution of a Creationist, on the fact that what are the assumptions behind the dating techniques. The dating techniques don't work as they use them.
And yet your book is not a peer-reviewed academic journal that shows this. I can state clearly with almost absolute certainty that your book will rely on the same forms of deception as every other anti-science individual out there. Misinformation and pure assertion. Zircon crystals don't give a care in the world about what you think, Mr. Martin.
It says hairiness is a matter of pure conjecture. Well, does anybody find bones with hair on them? How do they know that arm had hair or that leg had hair? There's no hair there. The guesswork approach often leads to errors, unquote. Well, that's the way it is. That's how they come up with those ones in between the monkey and Uncle Harry.
And that, my friends, is what saddens me most of all. This child in the audience does not know any better about Mr. Martin's dishonesty, for he's been brought up to accept what authority tells him. He won't go home and realise that Mr. Martin was only talking about cosmetics, or anything else that he has said is complete and absolute junk. It is truly saddening and disheartening to see such young minds be corrupted by such pathological deceivers.
Now look what Ernst Mayr from Harvard said back in 1983, Omni magazine. Since Darwin, every knowing person agrees. Man descended from the apes. Today there's no such thing as the theory of evolution. It is the fact of evolution. I heard Carl Sagan say that on TV. I heard Isaac Asimov say that. This is Ernst Mayr from Harvard saying that. Evolution is not a theory, it's a fact. By the way, you know what this is called? A statement like this? It's called baloney. That's what it is. It's just baloney. That's all it is. And so, this is another evolutionist, even if all the data point to an intelligent designer, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it is not naturalistic, says Dr. Scott Todd. That was in Nature magazine, letters to the editor back there in September of 2000. It's not naturalistic, so we can't include anything that has anything to do with God. That means we can be here without God. So atheistic evolutionists then assert there's no creator, designer, God, therefore purposeless, non-directed, accidental, mindless, chance, random processes produce the universe and everything animate and inanimate in it. You are the result of, if you don't believe in God, mindless processes. Here you are.
Atheism is purely the absence of theistic belief, possibly down to the fact that currently there is insufficient evidence for said God's existence. Evolution, on the other hand, solely deals with the process of biological diversity seen throughout the fossil record, the genetic mapping, and the appliance of observational study on the biological processes of natural selection, genetic drift, and general mutation. You know what we call what you just said? A complete lie made in full knowledge of that fact. This is why I decided to come straight in with the second video. The first video, Does It Really Matter?, was just an hour solid of claiming evolution was atheism. Atheism was bad, therefore by proxy, evolution was bad. You're welcome.
The Big Bang created space and time. That's what the evolutionists say. How can an explosion create space? Doesn't the space have to be there for the explosion to go somewhere? You see, a lot of faith goes into what we believe if we're going to believe in evolution.
Or just a general understanding of scientific principle which you quite clearly lack. You see, the Big Bang has nothing to do with the origins of the universe, merely describing the first few moments of the universe, i.e. referring to the expansion of space from a state of singularity to its current form. Nowhere is an explosion mentioned. That's just pure creationist claptrap. However, this state on singularity, which the Big Bang shows existed prior to its effects, is interesting as it is an enabling feature in the way that singularity is a state upon which quantum enters as a viable subject for the origins of the universe. So yes, the Big Bang is suggestive of naturalistic origins, however it's not the naturalistic origins in itself.
Now then, there's the thing called the law of biogenesis. And all that means is only living things give birth to living things. Okay, life is generated by life. Life begins with life. All things that are alive come from something that was alive. The Living World textbook says cells arise only by a division of a previously existing cell. Okay, sounds good to me. Well, where does life come from? Well, what does the Bible say? The Creator himself. He says he is the life. Jesus is the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. He is the source of life. Scientists say, we don't know where this life comes from. They haven't been able to make it happen. Lifeless chemicals cannot generate life.
Do you just not love the double standards of you cannot trust this textbook unless it agrees with me? As of yet, no actual academic study brought forward. Pasteur showed us that spontaneous generation was not possible, i.e. that multicellular organisms did not magically appear from this ether-like element that supposedly gave life on the air and sprang out maggots from meat and mice from corn. Abiogenesis, on the other hand, shows us rather promising results in a number of ways, yet you are demanding instant answers for a subcellular process which took place billions of years ago. That is going to take time and money, and even though it is still unfinished in its form, we have a superior and more probable model for the origins of life than those who merely assert magic via divine intervention.
They just can't do it. Well, can dead chemicals organize themselves into a living, reproducing cell? They used to think you could get life started from amino acids just in our environment. Then they realized the amino acids will not bond into proteins in the presence of oxygen. So that's when Stanley Miller came along and the Miller-Urey experiments that some of you have heard about. And he says, well, we'll do a reducing atmosphere, no oxygen. And so he put some things. It was ammonia and methane, water vapor, and hydrogen. And he puts them in there and he sparks it. By the way, no oxygen? Does water vapor have oxygen? There's a little bit of cheating on the experiment there, I think. But anyway.
Oh wow, you had to rely on calling a scientist a cheater because oxygen gas, i.e. the element of oxygen, was not present in vast quantities at the time. However, was present in the compound of water at the time.
No oxygen. What did he get? He got some amino acids. Sure enough, they're called the building blocks of life. Except his amino acids were in equal amounts. Amino acids come out left and right-handed. They're like mirror images of each other. He got an equal amount of both, which is poison to life, because if you're alive, you are 100% left-handed amino acids. All of life is left-handed, not a right-handed one in there. You throw a right-handed one in there, rigor mortis sets in, okay? You get sick and die. So you're going to be 100% left-handed. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means, yeah, he got his amino acids, but he said there's no oxygen. Now, if there's no oxygen, that means no ozone layer. If there's no ozone layer, that means if he did get life, it would be crispy toast in just an instant.
Not necessarily. There are life forms out there which survive in volcanic regions up to immense temperatures. What would be more of an issue is the UV radiation itself. Well, it would be more of an issue in multicellular organisms which could develop mutated cells that kill the host. In a single-celled organism, however, the cell either survives or it dies. Rapid natural selection. As for surviving, water is a naturally occurring UV barrier along with many other things on Earth. This is just another reason as to why water is such a likely place for the origin of life. Early organisms could exist in habitats just right for life, not too deep, not too shallow. This became even more important when photosynthesis evolved, early organisms with this ability being able to release oxygen into the atmosphere, creating the ozone, which, funnily enough, correlates with advances in biological diversity.
Also, there never was a reducing atmosphere on planet Earth, meaning no oxygen. The oldest rocks have lots of oxygen, oxidation in it. They have CO2, lots of oxygen history in the oldest rocks. So the whole thing here was just an idea.
I thought a basic understanding of chemistry was required, even for the field of dental practitioner. CO2 is another compound, specifically carbon dioxide, which is certainly thought to have been very abundant at the time. This is not the element oxygen, which would raise issue with Miller's work. That would be represented by a singular O. What seems to have escaped Mr. Martin was the volcanic atmosphere at the time of the Earth's formation and much of the Precambrian, which spews out both H2O and CO2 in vast quantities, yet pure oxygen in very minuscule amounts.
Now, by the way, they're still working on that idea. And Dr. Stanley Miller is still alive, as I understand it, still working on these kinds of things. But now they know, this is my lifetime, now they know you can't get life started without oxygen. So that's when they put it under the water. Oh, life started under the water, in that primeval ocean. So it can't start in the presence of oxygen. It can't start without oxygen. So let's put it under the water. That'll take care of it. Can life start underwater?
But that has been thought for a very long time. Miller's experiment was done with water. By your own admission, you actually tried to attack him for that. You just sound so profoundly lost right now, it's rather amusing.
Well, no, it can't. Why? Because of a thing called hydrolysis. That's your 10th grade science book. What is hydrolysis? Well, that's the action of water on things like proteins. And it acts like a corrosive. It acts like a rust. It breaks them down. And so a college textbook, Life, 4th edition, McGraw-Hill, page 341, says this: in an aqueous, watery environment, hydrolysis is more likely to occur than its opposite reaction, dehydration, synthesis. Dehydration means you get the water out. Well, how can you get the water out when you're in water? You see, so that makes sense. Hydrolysis breaks down chains of amino acids and nucleotides faster than they can form, countering the buildup of long chains. Well, that means you can't start life underwater. So what have we learned here then? That you can't originate life in oxygen. Life cannot originate without oxygen. Life cannot originate in water. How did life originate? We're only left with one option. In the beginning, God. Genesis 1, verse 1. That's the only option we're left with, and that's why this issue is so critical and crucial, and there's such a battle going on in our culture today.
And that, my friends, is why it's important for you not to check your facts. You see, I did exactly the opposite, and sure, hydrolysis can break down proteins, typically if there's an enzyme present. Now, Mr. Martin, tell me, if we are discussing the very first cellular organism, where did the enzyme, i.e. a chemical produced by an organism on a cellular level, come from to dissolve the first cell? Maybe think about that one. On top of this, there is a fact which I can actually forgive you, for you could not foresee it as it took place a year after this mockumentary was released. Following Miller's death, they re-examined the sealed vials from Miller's original experiment to find more amino acids than Miller was able to find due to the equipment restrictions at the time. So ultimately, how did life begin? The answer is, we don't know exactly. All we have right now is a single hypothesis which is at a rather advanced stage, but ultimately still a hypothesis. When dealing with subcellular life from over 3.5 billion years ago, it is going to take time to solve the details of its origins. though the fact remains that currently abiogenesis is the only horse in this race with any supporting evidence at all, due to the fact that creationists have yet to supply a testable hypothesis for divine origins. This makes it impossible to support due to it being untestable. An absence of comprehensive understanding merely means we are still unsure as to the precise details, not that life was magicked into existence by a deity. This is a fact that Mr. Martin, along with the rest of creationism, would be wise to keep hold of and learn. An argument from ignorance is not really an argument at all.